If you've studied the Second World War long enough, you know that some of the most important innovations weren't glamorous weapons or famous vehicles. They were quiet, industrial solutions born out of desperation. Shortages of steel, aluminum and rubber forced engineers to rethink materials that had been considered obsolete on the modern battlefield. Wood, of all things, came back into serious military use. But not ordinary wood. What made it viable was a specific class of paint additives and impregnating compounds that dramatically increased its resistance to bullets, shrapnel, fire and weather. This is one of those wartime technologies that rarely gets discussed, yet it influenced aircraft, boats, field structures, and even survival engineering long after the war ended. What most people don't realize is that WWII militaries weren't trying to make wood literally bulletproof in the modern sense. They were trying to make it survive hits long enough to keep crews alive, maintain structural integrity, and keep equipment functional. And they succeeded far more than history gives them credit for. Why WWII's engineers turned to wood and chemical protection rather than steel alone is the real starting point. By the early 1940s, steel was rationed aggressively. Aircraft manufacturers, naval designers and field engineers were under constant pressure to reduce metal usage. Wood was light, abundant, easy to shape and already well understood. The problem was that untreated wood splintered catastrophically when struck by bullets. A single hit could send lethal shards through a cockpit or hull. The solution wasn't thicker wood, but chemically altered wood. The key breakthrough was the use of phenolic resins and bituminous additives mixed into protective coatings and adhesives. These were not simple paints. They were resin-based compounds that soaked into wood fibres and then cured into a hard, shock-absorbing matrix. When applied correctly, the wood stopped behaving like brittle timber and started behaving more like a laminated composite. So, let's talk about how phenolic resin coatings fundamentally changed the way wood reacted to bullets. This is really what explains the whole bulletproof reputation. You see, phenolic resins were already in use before the war, mainly in things like electrical insulation and industrial laminates. But during the Second World War, engineers started using them as additives in protective coatings for wooden structures. When resin-saturated wood was hit by a bullet, the energy wasn't just focused at one spot. Instead, it got spread out across several layers, rather than concentrating at a single fracture point. Rather than the wood exploding into splinters, it would crush, crack, and, well, absorb the energy. This all mattered enormously in aircraft, like the British de Havilland Mosquito. The Mosquito's wooden airframe, which was bonded with phenolic resin adhesives and protected with resin-rich coatings, could actually take small-caliber fire and still keep flying. Crews even reported rounds embedding in the structure without causing catastrophic failure. That wasn't just luck. It was, quite simply, chemistry. Now, bituminous paint additives, and why they were used alongside resins, deserve a bit of attention. Bitumen, which is basically refined asphalt, was added to some Second World War protective paints to boost flexibility and moisture resistance. A coating made purely from hard resin could easily crack under vibration or big temperature swings. Bitumen fixed that by adding a bit of elasticity. The end result was a coating that would harden up under impact but flex under normal stress. This combination was widely used on wooden patrol boats, temporary fortifications, and field-built structures. A bullet striking bitumen-enhanced wood lost energy rapidly, especially at oblique angles. While it might still penetrate, it often failed to shatter the structure, which was the real killer in wooden designs. Why layered wood and paint mattered more than thickness is a lesson modern survivalists should note. WWII engineers learned quickly that one thick slab of wood performed worse than multiple thinner layers bonded and coated properly. Each layer disrupted the bullet's path, and the resin-rich coatings between layers acted as energy traps. This principle shows up again later in post-war ballistic plywood and early armoured composites. For practical application today, the lesson is simple. If you are building hardened wooden structures for remote shelters, workshops, or off-grid storage, multiple layers of hardwood bonded with modern epoxy or phenolic resin equivalents will outperform solid timber. Adding a flexible, tar-based exterior coating dramatically improves weather resistance and impact durability. How this knowledge was applied in wartime field engineering gives us, well, real-world proof. Forward airfields used resin-treated wooden planking for runways that had to survive debris, shrapnel, and repeated stress. Coastal defences used treated timber in anti-landing obstacles that could withstand small arms fire without collapsing. Even ammunition crates were treated with resinous coatings to reduce splintering and secondary injuries during attacks. These were not experimental gimmicks. They were standardized practices, documented in wartime engineering manuals and refined throughout the conflict. What this means for modern historians and survival-focused builders is, well, more than just academic. Understanding how Second World War engineers chemically enhanced wood really opens the door to smarter material choices today. A resin-saturated wooden wall backed by earth will stop fragments, slow bullets, and remain structurally sound far longer than untreated timber ever could. Boats, sheds, and cabins built with layered wood and protective coatings will survive impacts and harsh environments better than most people expect. This is not about romanticizing the past. It's about recognizing that wartime necessity produced solutions that remain relevant even now. Modern materials may be better, but honestly, the principles haven't changed. Why this Second World War paint additive still matters today is really the real takeaway. Phenolic resins and bituminous additives turned wood from a liability into a survivable material under fire. They didn't make wood invincible, but they made it predictable, durable, and far safer. That distinction mattered then, and well, it still matters now. If you value overlooked wartime engineering, practical historical knowledge, and real lessons drawn from serious research, this is exactly the kind of topic Iron Age Instincts exists to preserve. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel, share this with fellow historians and survivalists, and help keep these forgotten technologies alive.